So let's learn our new tshuva. I guess I'm going to have to print out for tomorrow another packet. Looks like. Okay, so our new tshuva is Birkat Ilanot, making the blessing on trees. Now, what is Birkat Ilanos? Anyone know? We say it around Pesach time. Yes, in the month
when you first see the flowers on the trees.
When you see the first flowers on fruit trees, like on a cherry tree, which cherry blossoms, you would say Birkas Ilanos. It's a bracha that you say once a year. Not everyone does it, but it's an appropriate thing to do. It's codified in Shulchan Aruch. And so this is a big deal for a lot of people. So Bishchunatenu yesh bechatzer shel echad habinyanim ilanot naot she'efshar levarech aleihem birkat ilanot. In our neighborhood, there's a courtyard that belongs to one of the buildings that has beautiful trees that blossom every spring, and we could make birkas ha'ilanos on it. Rov hashchenim sheba binyan rotzim lahazmin et hatzibur sheyasu birkat ha'ilanot ba'ota chatzer. Most of the residents of that building are more than happy to invite the entire community to come and make birkas ha'ilanos in that courtyard. Ach, echad mehashchenim bavinyan, but there's one, such a mean man. All right, he's a curmudgeon. Yeah, an old curmudgeon. He mitnaged betokef sheyikansu legina hamishutefet. He says, no way, I don't want anyone coming into our building's courtyard. It's going to make mud. They're going to step on the grass and on the flowers, and it's going to annoy me. This curmudgeon-y guy, Haim Zchuto la'akev. Can he prevent the public from coming in to make Birkat Ha'ilanot? Okay, what say you, folks?
Can you make the bracha from a distance?
Okay, so Joby first said, charge $1 a person, it'll cover whatever costs of damage. Okay, that's practical from a financial standpoint. What about the aesthetic damage? And he doesn't like it, and he's a curmudgeon-y, Scroogey kind of guy. Is he? What we going to say?
Can you make a bracha from a distance if you can see it?
Can you make a bracha? Maybe you can only see it by walking into the back. Maybe that's the only way to see it. Okay, Paul. It's jointly owned property. It's jointly. Remember, we've learned. So Errol suggests if the majority are coming, if the majority say it's okay, then go with the majority. Paul? It sounds like it's a Devar mitzvah. It's like the Talmud Torah thing. You can't protest if a person is okay. Very good. Okay, so that's right. Now, let's take a look at the tshuva. Okay, ba'ofen sherotzim likanes lechatzer sheshayechet la'adam echad kidei levarech birkat ha'ilanot v'hu mitnaged lekach. So first of all, when it comes to, let's say, one person, let's say an orchard is privately owned by an individual, and he's the only guy in the neighborhood who has trees that we can make a bracha on, birkat ha'ilanot. If he doesn't want people to come into his backyard, in a kosav b'sefer zochreinu l'chaim, he says there's a sefer called Zochreinu L'chaim. I'm not familiar with that sefer. It's the footnote says it was written by Rav Raphael Chaim Binyamin Peretz of blessed memory, that wrote it together with the Gaon Rav Chaim Palagi. Rav Chaim Palagi was a great Sephardic posek. Okay, so v'hu mitnaged lekach hine kosav b'sefer Zochreinu L'chaim legabe adam shetzavach ve'amar lo nichali shiyasu mitzvah b'mamoni haim shomen lo. So he asked the question that if a person is screaming, I don't want people to do a mitzvah with my property. Now, you know what this reminds me of? What is the halacha if you forgot your tefillin at home and you come to shul and you want to be able to borrow a pair of tefillin? You find a private pair of tefillin on the table. Are you allowed to use it? Yes. And on what basis are you allowed to use it?
You assume the person who owns it would allow it,
We assume that the
would
person
want you.
who owns it would want you to use his tefillin. Who wouldn't want to lend to others their property to have a mitzvah performed? So, but what if the person is standing there and says, "Step away from my tefillin. Don't touch that tefillin, or you'll be riddled with holes." Okay, so in that situation where you know a person doesn't want you to use their property, so then you're not allowed to put on their tefillin. So this guy is saying, I don't want people to do a mitzvah with my property. Behevi bazem machlokes. And he brought a machlokes on this very matter. But he says, Lachein vadai, im balabais makbid al anoshim shelo yikansu lechatzero kadei levarech birkata ilanot, I efshar la'asot kenu levarech, the hakaimalon safek brachos lahakil. He says, and therefore, if a balabas tells people, I don't want you coming into my yard to make birkas ha'ilanos, so then safek brachos lahakil. You're not allowed to take the law into your own hands and says, I'm going to make the bracha. I don't care what this guy says. It's my mitzvah. Right? We say safek brachos lahakil. Anytime there's a question halacha whether you should or should not make a bracha, we tell you desist from the bracha. That's the argument. Okay. Yeah, there's a violation of trespassing. The Gemara talks about. So would you say it's like a mitzvah haba ba'avera? It's a mitzvah that is acquired through an avera, and it may not even be a mitzvah, right? And so I think that could be part of the argument. I haven't seen this argument inside. So he says the annotator says, Mashma midivrei hazochrenu l'chaim sham, shehisik lahalacha shamrina nichale lena she ya'asu mitzvah b'mamona gam bal karcha. He says it seems like that one of the arguments that is made in that sefer that's being quoted is that people actually do want you to do a mitzvah, even when they protest, even against their will. And he says that there's a counter argument from the Pachad Yitzchak, who says that no, if a person says, I don't want you to use my property for a mitzvah, then he doesn't want it. You can't say, oh, really deep down you do want it. Amnam, and there are times in halacha where we say, oh, really deep down you do want it. Yeah. About giving a get, right? Oh, you really do want to give your wife a get. And so therefore we're going to beat you until you say, yes, you want to, right? So what am I going to do? I'm going to go over to your backyard and start beating you, break down your gate and take a baseball bat and start hammering away at you until you say, okay, make the bracha. I knew you wanted me to do a mitzvah with your, okay. Amnam bizochrenu l'chaim kasav sheyesh bazeh machloket haposkim ki ye'uyin sham. But he says it's a machlokes haposkim. V'lachein kasav rabbeinu hagon shlita the safek brachos lahakil, and that's why Reb Sharaga feels that the whole thing's a safek whether you should make the bracha or not, and so you have to be lenient and not make the bracha. Shuv ra'iti b'sdei chemed sheharich al divrei hazochrenu l'chaim hanal. V'hela gam kein dehecha shu tzavach sheinu rotza lo armina nichalei le'ina sheyasu mitzvah b'mamona ayin sham. And the Sdei Chemed also agrees that when a person says explicitly, I don't want you to touch my property, then we don't say that, oh, he really does want it. No, he has the right, even though it may not be proper, perhaps in God's vantage point, like why not? Let the guy do a mitzvah with your property. And he could have his own reasons. He could say, I don't want you guys come into my property. If I let you in, I got to let the whole neighborhood in, and it's going to create a balagan. And last year I did allow it, and everyone trampled all over my very well groomed backyard, and it took me 6 months to have to reseed everything, and I don't want to go through the hassle again. Umilvad zanira. L'kulei alma lo yoel levarech benidon didan. Kevin sheyesh lechalek ben hachalahatam. He says, and of course, there's a difference between what the present question is and the case in the Zochreinu L'chaim. He says, the chol ma shekosvu aposkim hanal lahatir lasus mitzvah b'mamono shel acher gam bal korcho, hainu davka shahamitzvah na'aseit bal korcho. He says, the only time that the poskim discuss the possibility of using someone's property against their will is only when the mitzvah is actually fulfilled. Kagon sherotza lahaniach tefillin, holy tolet lavo bal korcha. Such as, I want to put on your tefillin, or I want to shake your lulav if I find it in shul. And you say, don't touch my lulav. I can understand a guy saying, don't touch my lulav. You know why? Because I've seen people shake lulavs violently because they have some mishagas that the more you shake it, the bigger the mitzvah. What they don't realize is that when you shake a lulav violently, you usually render it to be non-kosher, or many times you could. So, we can understand. But he says, but even despite that, there are some poskim who say that even if the guy is saying, don't touch my stuff, you still have a right to take it. But I don't think we paskin that way. Masha'enkin b'nidon didan lo oser alav milavarich birkata ilanot al eitzav ela she'oser alav et haknisa lachatzero mimela eno yochel levarich. But over here it's different. He says, when I tell you don't touch my tefillin, I'm forbidding for you to do the mitzvah. The guy who owns the trees in his backyard is not forbidding you to do the mitzvah, to make the bracha. He's forbidding you to enter into his backyard. He's putting up a no trespassing sign and says no one is allowed to come in. And it's only a byproduct of that you're not able to make the bracha. So it's a bit removed. It's a one step removed from the case of taking your tefillin against your will. So he's forbidding trespass before the mitzvah is being performed. V'yesh lomar debichi gavna kuli alma moedim sheyefsheli ikonis lachatzero shel adam bal korcho kidei lekayim et hamitzvah achar kach. It could be that everyone would agree that in that situation where the mitzvah performance is only after the action that is being banned, then everyone would agree that you can't do that. I can't do a preliminary act that is forbidden by the owner in order to access a mitzvah, right? Let's say I don't have a pair of tefillin and I want to go into your house against your will, and there's a no trespassing sign on your house, but I figure, hey, I need to put on tefillin. Nothing is going to stand in my way of serving my creator. And so therefore I sneak into your house and I take your tefillin and I put it on, and then I sneak back in and put it back when I'm done. I mean, that I think everyone would agree is somewhat absurd, right? Would you? Well, I think one could make a legitimate argument that if there's no lock on the locker, and it's accessible from the public, is there a prohibition of trespassing into a locker? That's an interesting shaila. Yeah, yeah. Like, what is a person really hiding in his shul locker? You ever wonder? It's not like it's not going to be contraband or anything like that. Otherwise, he'd have it. Yeah, chometz. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Something that's not such a given. I mean, I could imagine that there might be some situations where it is the only tree in town. It's an exotic tree, and especially in the earlier days in Israel, where the only requirement for Birkas Hailanos is that it has to be a fruit tree, a fruit bearing tree. And then you make a bracha on the blossoms of that fruit. So that's why a cherry tree is a perfect tree. I think that's the one that's more prevalent in our neighborhood. But how many, in our neighborhood, there's probably quite a few. I don't know that it's necessarily true that these trees are on every block. Um, I could certainly imagine a scenario in Eretz Yisrael where there are not fruit trees on every block. Yeah. Think so. Ashkedia porach. That's yeah, yeah, yeah. An almond is a fruit. Yeah. So I don't know why we don't make a bracha on the shkedia on the almond tree. I don't know why. I'm not sure if you have to wait until the month of Nisan. I think you may have to wait until the month of Nisan before making the bracha. V'yesh lahosif v'yesh poskim d'lo amrinan haklal hanal ela b'mitzvah deoraisa. Aval b'hacha birkat ha'ilanot havi midorabanan. And furthermore, this argument that is offered by some poskim that you take a person's property against their will in order to do a mitzvah with it only applies to mitzvahs deoraisa, biblical mitzvahs. But a rabbinic mitzvah, we're not going to say that you can take someone else's property or go against someone's will and violate their property. So therefore, that's a further argument. Ayin bazeh bistei chemed sham. He says, Od matzanu b'sefer Maaseh Chemed shekatav b'shem Hagon Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita Od Chiluk Benidon Didan. They're quoting Rav Chaim Kanievsky that there's another distinction to be drawn in this situation. The chol mashakosba haposkim hanal shemol lasud mitzvah filu bal korchal. That those poskim who hold that you can even go against the person's will and take their property to do a mitzvah, anu dafka b'mitzvah chiyuvit shekvar mutelat alav lekayama. That's with a mitzvah where the Torah obligates you to do a mitzvah, and I'm currently obligated to do that mitzvah. Such as once the morning comes, I'm obligated to put on tefillin. Okay? Once the morning comes and it's Sukkot, I'm obligated to shake the lulav. Abol binidon didan birkata ilanot hi mitzvah kiyumit. Ki ein chiyuv levarech birkata ilanot lemi shelo ro'eh ota b'prichatam. He says, but in our scenario, this mitzvah of birkas ha'ilanos there's a distinction drawn by the poskim between a mitzvah chiyuvit and a mitzvah kiyumit. What's the difference between the two? A mitzvah chiyuvit is that if I don't do the mitzvah, I've actually done something wrong. But a mitzvah kiyumit is that when I do the mitzvah, I get credit, but by not doing the mitzvah, I haven't done anything wrong. That's what a mitzvah kiyumit is. I just don't get the credit. Rav Moshe Feinstein has a very interesting tshuva where he asks the question, what justification do Jews have who live in Chutz La'aretz? What justification do they have in not making aliyah? I mean, if it's a mitzvah deoraisa to live in Eretz Yisrael, which it clearly is according to the Ramban and other poskim, and some say even the Rambam holds that way. The Ramban counts it as one of the 613 commandments. So what justification do Jews living in Chutz La'aretz have for living in Chutz La'aretz? And his conclusion is that the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah kiyumit, not a mitzvah chiyuvit. There are other poskim who disagree with Rav Moshe, by the way, and say that we don't have a justification. But we'll put that aside for now. The thing that you can certainly rely on Rav Moshe to assuage your guilt for not having made aliyah, right? That's what I use, right? But it definitely weighs on you, right? So the argument that he's making over here is the only time that argument is valid, that I can go against your will and use your property to do a mitzvah, is only when it's a mitzvah chiyuvit. But the mitzvah of birkat ha'ilanot is a mitzvah kiyumit. It's something that if I see trees, I have an obligation to make the mitzvah. But if I don't see trees, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm not mechuyev to go out of my way to dafka do that mitzvah. This reminds me of a story that I must share with you. I don't know why, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. I think I've mentioned this before. Remember a number of years ago, there was a rabbi here in town who had this thing. He says, we've got to do the mitzvah of Pidyon Peter Chamor. Right? Remember I spoke to you about this? There was a rabbi who said, got to get a firstborn donkey and redeem it onto a sheep, and we'll slaughter the sheep, and we'll make a sunnah. And he asked me, he asked me if they could use the bayit to bring this donkey into the building, and they'll do a whole ceremony, and they'll decorate the donkey and make it look pretty. It's like putting lipstick on a pig, right? It's only so far you can do to decorate a donkey. Anyway, so I asked around, and I got an immediate no. What if it takes a dump? Is it's going to mess up the entire decor? So, but I wasn't keen on the idea, and I couldn't understand at the time. I didn't understand what was bothering me about it, but I was later able to articulate that there's no mitzvah to go out of your way to find a donkey. The Torah is only saying that when you own a donkey and it's a firstborn donkey, you can't work the donkey. It's clearly a mitzvah kiyumit, not a mitzvah chiyuvit. So why are we
chasing away the bird.
What? It's like
chasing away the bird.
the mother bird, which is a different story, right? But it's like is a person who's a vegetarian violating the mitzvah of not shechting animals, right? The Torah says that when you're hungry and you want to eat meat, you have a mitzvah to do shechita. If I'm a vegetarian and I don't want to shecht animals, am I doing an avera? Of course not. So why is there this? Why are we running after this particular kind of mitzvah? And it's sort of like it became to me something. It became like I was bothered by it, and I was able to finally articulate why I was bothered by it. But for this person, he felt that no, every mitzvah that's in the Torah, you want to be able to do it one time in your life, even if there's no reason to do it, to go out of your way to find a donkey. He felt that this is okay, so fine. That's your thing. But there's absolutely no basis in halacha to want to run and drive around Ontario until you find a donkey that's a firstborn donkey. There's no basis for this. Maybe it's not wrong, just like it's not wrong to go and to go on a safari in South Africa. Do whatever you want. But I don't know that it was necessarily to make it into like a whole ceremony and to get the whole community to I don't know. It could be. So maybe that was the benefit. Anyway, yeah, he ended up doing it. Actually, they had a Suda afterwards, and I went to the Suda because I didn't want to be the curmudgeon guy, right? But yeah, right. Anyway.
Why didn't you try this?
Yeah.
So the same sort of concept of put all these mitzvahs into the world for you to do. So you should at least try once.
Try one mitzvah. Try mitzvahs. Yeah. So I'll divorce my wife so that I can fulfill the mitzvah of giving a get. So is that what you're suggesting, Ron? I'm glad your marriage is secure. Okay, good. All right. Ba'al Kain. So therefore, he says, so therefore it should be obvious that I'm not allowed to trespass into someone's property against their will so that I can place myself in a situation where I now have a mitzvah to do. Before I see his tree, I have no mitzvah, Birkas Hailanos. The mitzvah is only when I see the tree in the spring that I have a mitzvah to make a bracha. But if I haven't seen the tree and I hear that there's a tree that I can go to, come on. Yeah. But I haven't seen the tree. I hear that he's got a tree and I have the opportunity to make a bracha, so I'm going to go trespass on his property. Come on. Upashat the Bechi Hagavna Lukuli Alma Efshel Lachufo Ad Kan Tochen Dvar. And so that's the argument of Rav Chaim Kanievsky as to why Bichlal you cannot justify trespassing onto someone's property. Now, up until now, we've only seen the discussion of when it's privately owned property. Now we have this is still privately owned property, but it's jointly owned by several tenants. So now we have to go back to Rav Shiraga's text and find out what is he going to hold in this situation, where the majority of the tenants are more than happy to invite the public to make Birkas Ha'ilanos, and it's the one curmudgeon who's against it. So he says, Aval yesh ladun b'nidon didan, sherov hadayarim maskimim l'tzibor lihikanes lechatzer. He says, in our situation, the majority of the tenants are totally fine. Chutz midayar echad shemitnaged, ha'im zchuto lihitnaged? Does one person have a right to block the public from coming into the yard? Hamishna omeret b'maseches nedarim legabe chatzer hashutafim shehaya echad min hashuk mudar hanaa me'echad me'hashutafim. So the Mishnah has a discussion in Maseches Nedarim. Let's say there's a courtyard that's jointly owned, and one of the partners in the ownership of the courtyard made a vow that Ruvain cannot get benefit from him. Ruvain, you will never get benefit from me. So when a person makes such an eder, Ruvain is not allowed to get benefit from anything that belongs to that guy. So in that situation, ladas chachamim aselo likanes lachatzer, afal pishu lo midar mishar hashchenim. So according to the chachamim, that fellow Ruvain is not allowed to enter into a courtyard where that guy has a partial ownership of that courtyard, even if when the other neighbors give permission. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer shemutar lo likanes chatzer ki yachol lomar lo l'toch shel chavercha ani nichnas ve'eni nichnas l'toch shelcha. And there's another opinion in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, where Chazal say about him that his teaching is kavinaki, that his teaching is absolutely pristine, that he is allowed to. Reuven is allowed to go into the yard. You know why? Because he can say, I'm not, wherever I step, that's not your portion, that's the portion of your neighbor. In other words, on the one hand, the Chachamim look at it as every single molecule of that yard, every neighbor has a share in. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, yesh breira, that you can actually say, no, retroactively, we can say that every step that you're taking at that moment belongs to the rest of the neighborhood, and you have an ownership in the other parts. Because of Harashba, dahainu davka kishu nichnas l'tzorech hashutav shuhu lo mudar mimenu hana. But the Rashba writes that you can only make that argument of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov when the person when Reuven is coming into the yard at the request of one of the other neighbors who has not taken a vow. And he asks you to come in because he needs your assistance with something. Bein shehu tzarich l'shutaf, bein shashutaf tzarich lo. Keven sha'achotzer kenuya l'chol echad mehem u'l'chol mi shetzarich lahem. Because everyone has rights in that courtyard. So if, let's say, one neighbor says, I need that guy, I need a consultation, and I need him to take a look at something in the courtyard. So how do your rights trump my rights? Your rights say that this guy can't come into the courtyard, but I say that he can come into the courtyard and I need him for something, or he needs to talk to me. So why shouldn't my rights be at least as good as yours? But if it's not for any of the partners of the courtyard, but rather for the benefit of the person himself, of Reuven, everyone would agree that that's us. We'll have to continue this discussion, Amir Tzashem, tomorrow. Just remember where we are. Okay, we're discussing the Mishnah and the Dharma.